heroism of President Zelensky and the resolute determination of the Ukrainian people. He has been met by a united West, together with our friends around the world, and we have taken decisive action. Today, we have acted with the US, the EU, Japan and Canada to cut Russia's central bank off from our markets. The ruble has fallen by over 40% as a result. As much as $250 billion have been wiped off the Russian stock market, and today their stock market is closed. The EU, Germany, Sweden and others are following our lead in providing defensive weapons to Ukraine. Germany has frozen Nord Stream 2. Putin has been confounded by our collective response. That is why he is resorting to more and more extreme rhetoric. But of course, the situation remains dire. The government and people of Ukraine are facing a continued onslaught. The days ahead are likely to prove tougher still. The UK and our allies will have to undergo some economic hardship as a result of our sanctions. But our hardships are nothing compared to those endured by the people of Ukraine. Casualty numbers are rising, and over 300,000 people have already been displaced. This is a struggle for Ukraine's freedom and self-determination, but it is also a struggle for freedom and democracy everywhere, and for a survival of a Europe whole and free. We feel a particular responsibility, as the UK is a signatory to the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which provided Ukraine with security guarantees. This premeditated invasion, in violation of international law and multiple international commitments, cannot succeed. Putin must lose. We are doing everything we can to stop him and to restore Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We will do this by backing Ukraine against unjustified aggression, by degrading the Russian economy and stopping it funding Putin's war machine, and by isolating Putin on the world stage. First of all, we're backing Ukraine with defensive weapons, humanitarian aid and economic support. The UK was the first European nation to send defensive weapons to the country. Those weapons are being used today to halt Russian tanks and defend Ukrainian towns and cities. Our latest consignment of defensive support left Brize Norton over the weekend. We're also leading on humanitarian support. Yesterday, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced a further 40 million of humanitarian aid. This will provide Ukrainians with access to basic necessities and vital medical supplies. We call on Russia to enable humanitarian access and safe passage for civilians to flee the violence. The UK is also supporting Ukraine's economy, including through 100 million of ODA and guarantees of up to $500 million in development bank loans. Secondly, we are cutting off funding for Putin's war machine. We're coming together with the US, the G7 and the EU to take further decisive steps. We've been joined by Australia, Singapore, Switzerland and many more. There is a growing list of countries who are determined that this aggression cannot stand. We've agreed many Russian banks will be removed from the SWIFT system, kicking them out of international finance. This is the first step towards a total SWIFT ban. Our collective action against Russia's central bank will prevent them from deploying their international reserves to mitigate the impact of our sanctions. We're also launching a joint task force to hunt down the assets of oligarchs hit by our sanctions. The UK is proud to lead by example. We've already put in place the largest package of sanctions in our history. We've sanctioned Putin and Lavrov, Russia's defence industry, and a growing list of oligarchs. We've approved asset freezes on several Russian banks. We're banning Russian airlines and private jets from our airspace. But we are determined to go much, much further. We want a situation where they can't access their funds, their trade can't flow, their ships can't dock, and their planes can't land. Today, I can inform the House I will be laying 2 new pieces of sanctions legislation. The first introduces a set of new powers against Russia's financial sector. It includes powers to prevent Russian banks from clearing payments in sterling. With over 50% of Russian trade denominated in dollars or sterling, our coordinated action with the United States will damage Russia's ability to trade with the world. And as soon as this legislation comes into force, we will apply it to Sberbank, Russia's largest bank. I will also be imposing a full asset freeze on three further banks: VEB, Russia's National Development Bank; Sovcombank, the third largest privately owned financial institution in Russia; and Oskryter, one of Russia's largest commercial banks. We will bring in a full asset freeze on all Russian banks in days, looking to coordinate with our allies. This same legislation will prevent the Russian state from raising debt here, and it will isolate all Russian companies, that's over 3 million businesses, from accessing UK capital markets. Global giants like Gazprom will no longer be able to issue debt or equity in London. The second piece of legislation will ban exports to Russia across a range of critical sectors. This includes high-end technological equipment such as microelectronics, marine and navigation equipment. This will blunt Russia's military-industrial capabilities and act as a drag on Russia's economy for years to come. I appreciate the consequences of this step for British people and British businesses operating in Russia, and the Department of International Trade and the Treasury will offer advice and guidance to affected UK businesses. My consular staff will continue to support British nationals in Russia, as well as those in Ukraine. And we will keep ratcheting up our response. More legislation will follow in coming weeks in sanctioning Russian-occupied territories in the Donbass, extending more sanctions to Belarus, and limiting Russian deposits in UK banks. We will continue working through our hit list of oligarchs, focusing on their houses, their yachts, and every aspect of their lives. In addition, we will be introducing the Economic Crime Bill tomorrow. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will be setting out more in the next statement in the House. This is all about flushing out the oligarchs' dirty money from the United Kingdom. And we will continue to work with our G7 allies to cut off the Russian economy and cut the free world's dependence on Russian gas, depriving Putin of his key source of revenue. Finally, we're leading the diplomatic effort to ensure there is a chorus of condemnation against President Putin. In the OSCE, a key part of the European security architecture, 45 countries condemn Russia by name. At the UN Security Council on Friday, over 80 UN members voted for or co-sponsored a resolution condemning Russia's aggression. Russia stood alone in opposing it. Putin is isolated. No one is willing to back his war of choice. In recent days, I've spoken to my counterparts in more than 20 countries around the world. Yesterday, I met G7 foreign ministers, where we were joined by Ukraine's brave foreign minister, my friend Dmytro Kuleba. Everyone is clear Putin must lose, and we will carry on increasing the pressure until he does. We have all seen Ukraine's determination to fight. Putin's war could end up lasting for months and years. So I say to our Ukrainian friends, we are with you. In Britain and around the world, we're prepared to suffer economic sacrifices to support you. However long it takes, we will not rest until Ukraine's sovereignty is restored. I commend this statement to the House.
We now come to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement and for the continued briefing that she continues to give me on Privy Council terms. We have all been inspired by the gallant and tenacious actions of Ukrainians in defence of their country. This is true courage under fire. President Zelensky has epitomised the bravery, the dignity and resolve of a nation fighting back, fighting for values that we all share, for democracy, for freedom and for the rule of law. The Foreign Secretary is right when she says that Putin's invasion is not so far going to plan. But will she agree with me that we must not let our focus slip for even a second? We will continue to stand united with our allies and partners, supporting Ukraine and opposing this outrageous campaign of aggression. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had the honour of meeting with Ukraine's ambassador with the Shadow Defence Secretary. He thanked all sides of this House for the united opposition that we have shown to Vladimir Putin's illegal war and the support we continue to show for Ukrainian sovereignty. Putin is not only facing a united West, he is facing a truly united kingdom. Together, we have enacted sanctions that are having a strong effect. The ruble has crashed by over 40%. The main borrowing rate is up 20%, and inflation is reportedly hitting around 65% per year. Oligarchs are being frozen out of their bank accounts, and the Central Bank of Russia is being blocked from part of the 640 billion war chest that it holds in foreign reserves. Labour's priority is to cut off Putin's rogue state from our economic system and to undermine his campaign of aggression in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, we recognise that on the 24th of February, the European security order changed. Our continent faces a transformed strategic context. Our world is at the start of a new era. I pay tribute to the political courage shown by all of our partners, particularly our allies in Germany, who have recognised that by taking the difficult and brave decisions to provide Ukraine with lethal weapons for its fight and to commit to the significant increases in defence spending that this new reality demands. Yesterday, President Putin raised the alert level of Russian nuclear forces. Mr. Speaker, as the 5 nuclear weapons states, including Russia, reaffirmed in January, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Can I ask for her assessment of this decision, given the understandable concern it will have caused amongst the public? Turning to sanctions, we welcome the further steps the government has announced today. The progress made by the UK, the EU and the US on cutting off Russian banks from SWIFT is something Labour has called for some time. The moves to finally clamp down on dirty money, so long demanded by Labour and colleagues across the House, are long overdue. It's regrettable that it's taken this long and a crisis of this nature for action, but we welcome the steps and will study them carefully. But there's still more the government can do. The last time I stood at this dispatch box, I asked what steps the government has taken to ensure members of Russia's legislature, the Duma, can be sanctioned. Still today, I'm waiting for that answer. Similarly, while I welcome the Foreign Secretary's action against Russia's financial sector, the government should go further to ensure sanctions can be placed against Russia's extractive industries, energy industries and technological industries. And we believe that we must ensure that the insurance industry cannot underwrite and de-risk Putin's war. As I said during my last time at the dispatch box, it's vital that these sanctions are broad enough to inflict damage on every aspect of Russia's economy. We welcome the moves that the government have taken to ensure Russia is cut out of the SWIFT banking system, but can the Foreign Secretary explain the dialogue that she's had with our allies about cutting the country out of the Visa MasterCard system too? Finally, can the Foreign Secretary give assurances that Putin will also feel the consequences of his despicable actions in terms of international opportunities available to the country in sports and culture? The diplomatic unity of the West is crucial, but we must also widen the global coalition opposing the war. I pay tribute to the political courage shown by our partners, particularly our allies Germany, who recognise this. But difficult and brave decisions also require further action. Forgive me. Some countries like Kenya have spoken out with clarity and elegance about Putin's imperialism, but others have stayed silent. Some are even allies of the UK and fellow democracies. So can I ask what steps the Foreign Secretary has taken to ensure that the widest possible range of voices speaks up in opposition to this war? Mr. Speaker, as well as commending the bravery of the Ukrainians demanding their country, we must also praise the courage of ordinary Russians taking to the streets of Moscow, in St. Petersburg and beyond, under the threat of repression to show their opposition to this despot. Mr. Speaker, this is the 5th day of fighting. Ukraine is still facing an all-out war from Putin's army. It's a mark of the bravery of Ukraine's forces that neither Kiev nor Kharkiv have fallen. We salute their courage, and this whole House will continue to stand with them.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his statement of unity, and a strong message is going out to Putin and around the world that the United Kingdom is united in our support for Ukraine. And we can see that from the demonstrations, we can see that by the public concern and interest in this appalling act of aggression and invasion that has taken place. Yesterday, I joined a call with the G7 foreign ministers. We agreed that the sanctions we put in place so far are having an impact, but we need to do more. And we need to work in unison, and we need to act in unity. We have also agreed to increase the supply of defensive weapons in Ukraine. And the honourable gentleman is correct. Germany has taken courageous steps. They've transformed their energy policy, they've transformed their defence policy, and we have seen a huge rising, I think, of public opinion right across Europe. But I also want to praise Japan, South Korea, Singapore, which has put sanctions on for the first time. And I and my colleagues in the Foreign Office are putting in calls to foreign ministries around the world. We're encouraging more countries to put on sanctions, more countries to speak out at the UN. The honourable gentleman is right. There are some countries who are democracies who should be standing up against the invasion of a sovereign democracy, and we are making that point to them day and night. But what we are seeing is Putin is completely isolated. There is nobody else backing him up in these international fora, and there is a growing group of countries who are prepared to put sanctions on, who are prepared to supply defensive weapons, and we are leading the charge in bringing those countries on board. On the specific issues he mentioned, we do have a hit list of oligarchs and Duma members that we are working through to sanction as soon as we can. Foreign Office officials are working through the night, and we have extra lawyers in. We've tripled the amount of people in our sanctions department to make this happen. We are looking at more sanctions on the energy industry, the technology industry. We want to see a total ban on SWIFT transactions. We're encouraging our allies across the world to back that. We also want to see a full bank freeze in the coming days. It's vitally important we maintain unity with our allies. There are many countries that are heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas. The UK only has 3% of our energy from oil and gas. Some countries are as high as 90, 100%. So what we have to do is reduce that over time, and that is what we are working on through the G7. I am very pleased that the honourable gentleman has backed the approach we're taking. I want to continue to work cross-party to do all we can to support the brave people of Ukraine and to make sure that Putin loses.
The Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat.
Speaker, I welcome very much my right honourable friend's commitment to be working literally through the weekend, night and day, to get these sanctions right and to get them in place. Will she join me in assuring the Russian people that the monies frozen, the money seized, which are, let's face it, stolen very often from them in the first instance, will be held and returned to the Russian people when this criminal conspiracy that laughably calls itself a government falls and they actually have a proper administration to which it can be returned? And will she also join with me in urging many other countries around the world to join together and to create a single fund from which this can be created, a repayment mechanism for the damage done to Ukraine and the rebuilding of Russia in due course?
Well, my honourable friend is right. Our issue is not with the Russian people, many of whom are now protesting against this appalling regime. It is with Putin and his cronies. That is who we're targeting with our hit on oligarchs, and he is right that that money should be protected, and I'll